Hi, I'm Tom from Migot Photography, and welcome to another episode of Capture It with Tom's friend. And my friend today is Jonathan Chritchley. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Tom.
Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate you joining us for this discussion about your journey, your photographic journey, learning a bit more about the man behind the camera, and understanding a little bit your approach. And you've been very generous as well, accepting to review some photographs that were sent to me. So I had over 117 images that were sent to me from all over the world, and that was quite interesting. And well, we're going to keep that for the end of our discussion. I've selected 10 of them, and these 10 images, I've sent them to you. So you've seen them in the same quality as I've received them. But that's for later. Let's start with my first question, is when did you get the photography virus?
The virus. I think when I was a boy, funny, many people I've spoken to about when they first got into photography, they often say it's a result of their father. It's a funny thing that sort of carries through. And I suppose in many ways I'm very similar in that my father was not by any means a professional photographer, but he loved his cameras, and there were always cameras lying around the house. And I used to, as a small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, used to be passed down some of these wonderful old cameras. And I used to, with no film in it, I just used to be looking through the camera and framing things. And so I think the seed was sown right back then. But it wasn't until much later the passion for the sea came about, and then as a result of that passion, I thought, well, what a wonderful way to actually record my feelings and stories about the sea, perhaps by picking up a camera again. So that's when it really hit me. I guess it was in my early 20s.
All right. And one thing that is interesting is when we look at your work, and here on the screen we only see a small selection of what you do, but the way I've actually picked the images, I thought they really represented what your work is about. And although the work is fairly eclectic, there's always there's two themes that seems to be constant with you. The first one is water, the sea or the ponds or the lakes, and the other one is monochrome. So why the water? Why this? I'm not going to call it obsession, but why this focus on water?
You can call it an obsession, because I think it's probably what it is. It's just, who knows? I don't know, Tom. I didn't grow up by the sea. I grew up just outside London. But we used to spend a lot of our family holidays, obviously, at the coast, as many people do. And being on a boat or being in the water was something that, from a very early age, I remember being very special. Sadly, my father died when I was about 12 or 13, and we moved down to the south coast of England, away from London. And then the sea became a confidant, something to go and sit by and to reflect by. And I think it's all started then. It became something very deep for me then, and it's never changed for all those years. It's still somewhere I can go and feel completely at home, completely relaxed. And when it comes to taking pictures, I always believe that one takes photographs in an environment where one feels the most comfortable. And certainly for me, that's what it was. It was the love of the sea first, and then, as I said, finding a way to turn that into something that like an art form. And for me, the camera was the way I did that. The sea it will always be something very special to me, and it's pretty much present in almost everything I do anyway. Probably 95% of my photographs have something to do with the sea in some way.
Mm. And the other aspect of your photography is monochrome. Although you do, and I did pick one color image. I think it had to be the exception to the rule. But why monochrome? Is it because you started photography when it was still in the old days with film, and you developed yourselves, and that's how you see the world? But can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, in many ways, you're right, but also it's deeper than that. It was a choice, of course. Back in the day when film was prevalent, one could one could develop, as you said, and print one's own black and white photographs in the kitchen or in the bathroom or whatever, and that has something to do with it, but it was actually a choice. I just prefer the mystery of black and white. I think it's like, I already mentioned that when a photograph of mine is relaying a story, or at least a feeling about something that I'm looking at, and I like to try and put my own spin on it, I suppose, whether it's the way I shoot it, the crop, the angle, the space. I like to make that particular scene have to tell my story about it, I suppose. And the black and white came a way of telling a story, but leaving the story untold. So people who are looking at the photograph could sort of fill in their own final details if they wanted to. And I like that. I like the fact that it leaves a bit of mystery and romanticism in an image. Not that colour can't, it can. It's just a personal choice. I just feel, again, like being by the sea, I just feel much more comfortable with monochrome. And I think this panel of pictures you've chosen here, that probably reflects how much colour I do. It is probably 1 in sort of 15 or 20, not even that. I think it's probably maybe 8 or 9 photographs I have that are colour, and even then they tend to be very blue. So I guess the sea influence is still very much present.
You've just mentioned the word crop at one point, and I think with the exception of one image, which is selected here, all the others are square-shaped.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that this has nothing to do with Instagram, and this is there is another reason. Reasons.
Yeah. I mean, again, you're picking up on probably the 3 things that are associated with me: the sea, black and white, and square. It's part of a signature, I suppose, although it's not done for that reason. The square, I don't know. I've been asked this question a lot, and I never thought about it. I never thought about why I did it. So when I started getting asked for magazines and things, why is it always square? I thought of 3 reasons it might be. So do you want me to tell them all?
Please go for it. Yes.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I'll do it very briefly. Well, the first one is that when I was small, when I was a small boy, in my bedroom I had a very small black and white television. So this is in the sort of 70s, and this particular black and white television was in my father's office, and then it got sort of passed on to me when he got a bigger colour one, I suppose. And it was very small, about this big, and a square screen. So everything I watched in my room was in black and white and square. And I think that's probably the first reason that I feel comfortable with that square. It takes me right back to those times. Second reason is that when I was a little bit older, I started to work as a lifeguard on the south coast of England, and we used to, in our break times, it was mostly based on boats, very fast, rigid inflatable boats, and we used to keep the boats in a boathouse right by the water's edge, and we used to sit in there on the hot days in our break times and just sort of watch the world go by. And I just remember the shape of the doors of this boathouse formed an absolute square. Once the doors were open, there was a square, and all I could see was the horizon with sort of water and sky. And that, day after day after day after day, was a wonderful thing to sit and look at, and it really stuck in my head. So I think that's the second possible reason, and I don't know which of these is true or correct, maybe a combination of all 3. And the third one is simply that when I started going to an art college, and we were allowed to mess about with equipment, I homed in on an old Hasselblad 500 cm, which actually I have one right here because I still, although I don't use it much anymore, I still have one around. And this, as you probably know, is 6x6, so it shoots in square as well, and it also makes the most beautiful noise. And so this also became square, and I felt very comfortable with that. So I think, although now I've moved away from film into digital, I find the square is something I feel very comfortable with.
Mm. And so, how do you proceed today? I mean, you say you don't shoot with the Hasselblad anymore. What gear do you actually use? And do you shoot in monochrome mode in the picture style? Do you actually shoot in square? Because most cameras don't do square nowadays. You would shoot 4x5 or 2/3. So what do you do?
Well, nowadays I use several of these. It's a Nikon D810, which is for me a wonderful camera. It has the battery pack on the bottom as well. I like the weight. It's a very heavy camera, and I like the weight of it. I did experiment with medium format digital cameras. But the problem is the environment that I work in, and you've already mentioned, is mostly shot by the water's edge. I like also very damp, misty conditions. They're not really the best cameras in the world for that sort of environment. I think they're getting better at it, but still, I found it quite limiting. And so I found that these cameras could really stand getting wet, getting soaked, having waves breaking over them, and would just carry on working. I don't recommend it, but they still work, and that's a wonderful thing. And obviously, reliability is a major factor in what I do. I can't be out on the water somewhere, and then suddenly the camera doesn't work. So that's a huge factor. To answer your question about the shape, the crop, this camera shoots in 5x4 format, which I set it to. I set the screen to black and white, to monochrome, which I can do, which means that when I shoot, I look back at the picture, I see it in black and white, although of course it's in RAW, so the actual file itself is color. And then when I get it back, when I load it into, I use Lightroom and Photoshop. When I load it into Lightroom, I just crop it. Once I found the images that I want to work with, I just crop them very quickly into a square. So from 5x4 into square is not a huge leap. And I tend to just shoot slightly wider than I want. So I'm thinking square all the time, really. And the black and white conversion comes at that point. And my processing is very rapid. It takes 5 minutes. If it takes 6 minutes, it means there's probably something wrong with the photograph and I need to go and do it again because I'm not happy sitting in front of a computer. I like getting it right when I'm shooting. So processing is very quick.
Do you use the Nix software at all for black and white? Because I know many people do.
They do, fine, whatever works for you. I don't. I looked at it when I like to sort of try and stay current with everything that's going on. So when it first came out, I don't know how many years ago it was, I downloaded the sort of trial version, had a look. But I think over the years, I've just because I came from a black and white, from a darkroom background. I found a method using Lightroom and Photoshop that really I could get the same look that I looked for in the darkroom, and I developed, as I said, a method that was very quick. And so I didn't really find the need to change to have other things. I tend to look at things when they come out, but I've stuck with what I do. With little changes, I pick up things along the way. But generally, what I do, and again, it becomes part of a signature, I think, how you process things. Like in the darkroom, how you printed things is part of the signature as a photographer. In my field, that's important too.
So does that mean that you really use the post-production tool very basically, and not doing composite work and changing dramatically the image in terms of removing things that normally would be there but you don't like it in the final result? You basically use the image that you got as a negative as you used to in the darkroom, and you just dodge and burn.
Yeah, pretty much, plus maybe 5%. So I like to stay faithful to the idea, the original idea. If there's a sort of sense of blob or something, I'll get rid of that and I'll do some very basic things. But in the darkroom, one would after a print was made, one was able to spot what they call spotter print, which I'm sure you know all about, which is where you take your print and you get these very fine inks, and you basically can clone out little sort of things that you don't want. And so I got quite good at doing that in the darkroom. And so I tend to do a little bit of a similar thing. If there's something I really don't want in a frame, but generally I can do the same thing with either darkening that part of a frame, so whatever it is that I didn't want people to see becomes more invisible. But I certainly, the composite thing, I'm not very comfortable with things like that. I'm not very good at, I don't really feel comfortable with it. I worked out, in the days when nowadays you rent Photoshop, don't you, as part of a package, and you pay whatever it is a month. And I worked out that when you used to buy it, and it used to cost, I don't know, £400 or £500, I don't know, I worked out that the actual amount of Photoshop I used was about £7.26. So you can see that. So I use very little of Photoshop. I use curves and gradients and a little bit of cloning and some dodging and burning, and that's really it. But that £7.26 is very valuable to my workflow, if you like. I hate that word, but you know what I mean. So it's very slight what I do, but nonetheless it changes the picture and one adds back in a bit of character. Again, shooting in the film days, I think film had character. You would choose a specific film for that character, whether it be color or highly saturated color or grainy black and white, contrasty black and white. You would choose a film. So in a way, you were pre-processing by your choice of film. And I think what I tend to do is just add in a bit of that character, maybe a bit afterwards. So that's really what I do, is a bit of contrast, maybe a bit of grain, and then that's it.
So it's interesting because now knowing that you don't do composite and heavy work in Photoshop, there's one image that I like to bring up, and this is it. Very simplistic when we look at it, but something really caught my eye, which is the contrast of, and not only in terms of luminosity, but in terms of movement and action. When I first saw this photograph, I was sure that it was a composite because of the movement in the sky. Very heavy movement where we see how the clouds are all blurred out, and yet we do see some action in the water, but not that much. It's almost like if the water was frozen a little bit, or you froze it with the camera. So how did that happen? How can you have so much movement in the sky and barely any in the water?
Yeah, it's funny. There's no movement in the sky because it's frozen. The reason I really took the picture was because the sky looked like that. I didn't. It was just the most incredible phenomenon. This was actually in Bure. It's not too far from where I live in southwest France, and I'd been in the town. And I was just coming back out of the town up onto the cliffs, and I just saw this light. And I looked at the clouds maybe 3 or 4 times, and I thought, that can't be happening. What's this? And something was going on with the clouds. That I guess it must have been very windy. And the clouds were sort of forming these almost blurry shapes. And I've seen this happen before when I've been doing some sailing photographs, where you get maybe a solitary cloud that starts to look elliptical, and I've seen, and it looks like it's moving, and which of course it is, but it gives an element of movement even when the photograph is frozen. So I stopped and parked incredibly badly on the side of the road and just leapt out and worked for 10 or 15 minutes just with a lens from the top of the cliff, and the light was just incredible. And yes, these clouds were incredible. So that was really why I stopped and shot, was because the clouds looked like that.
Mm. Do you tend to use a tripod a lot in your photography?
I use a tripod certainly obviously I do a little bit of long exposure things. Of course, one has to then. Otherwise, I prefer the freedom of not using it. There's parts of my work, I do, as you said, it's quite eclectic what I shoot, although it has a similar theme around the water mostly. There's a lot of different styles involved in what I do, and I love that. I like to push myself and try and experience and try new things out. So if I'm working with waves or with horses or with this sort of thing, generally I don't use a tripod. Of course, if I'm doing something a bit more long exposure or then I'll of course use a tripod. It becomes part of the array of tools that one has to have.
Hmm. You mentioned that you now live close to Biarritz, Osgore, which is a very famous spot for surfing, for wave surfing.
Yeah.
I've seen some, when we go to your portfolio, and I'm just going to bring it up just so everyone can actually go and check it out, because it's really, really interesting, and there's a lot more work there in your portfolio than the small selection that I've picked on. There's some photograph that we see of the water with the surfers waiting for their waves, but there don't seem to be any photograph of the surfers in action. Is it because they're not in your portfolio, or do you do any work for Surfing Magazine?
No, I don't work for anybody really. The work I do is entirely for me, and then it's after I've found a photograph or a print that I'm happy with, then it has to go out and work for me. I don't work for anybody, and I don't shoot surfers. The only time there's anybody in a photograph of mine generally is if it's part of the scene, in that maybe a fisherman on a boat, or someone, part of a crew of a boat or something. But generally, I don't have people in my pictures, and in fact, I do what I can to avoid it. And the photographs you're talking about, I did a couple with just surfers in the water, and it's shot from quite a long. Yeah, there you go. It's shot from quite a long way away, so they just become like little sort of seals in a way, which I quite like, that high key aspect. The light was actually very very pale blue, and the surface was just standing out like little sort of ink dots. And so I quite liked that. It was more the pattern they were making rather than the fact that they're surface, and that's what drew me. And pattern and shape is something I look for most of all in my work. It doesn't, regardless of what I'm shooting, it tends to be just something that I can create a nice shape and form out of. And in this case, it was a very simple picture. I mean, the light on the water was exceptional, very sort of silvery, which I love. And then, as I said, these just contrasty bunch of surfers. There are far too many for one or two waves that are around, but I kind of like that sort of whole thing. Yeah, there you go.
So I know you use filters, long exposures at least, some other interesting artistic one like the mist one from Lee. And the reason why I discovered you, so everyone knows, I first thought that I discovered you in the Lee Filters video, where you were promoting the long exposure one in a great, very interesting video that you did in Cornwall, southwest of England. But no, it turns out that I discovered you because of your sales work. But before we talk about the sale work, I wanted to know whether you use any colorful filter, given that you shoot black and white. Do you still use those filters, like the green, the red, the yellow, or no, you just don't use those filters because they're not useful nowadays?
I don't use them. I obviously did in the film days, but no, I don't now. I tend to just shoot. If I can possibly shoot with the lens, with nothing on the lens, I will. I don't put any protective filter on at all. I always figure that one pays a lot of money for these lenses, and then just to keep putting bits of glass on or whatever all the time can't be good for it. You know, you tend to be sort of diluting, I think, the quality. I use the Lee system, of course, if I'm shooting long exposures, or sometimes if I have a very bright sky and I'm trying to sort of hold back some highlights, I'll use grads. But apart from that, for this sort of thing, I don't use filters really. I mean, occasionally for the sky, but very, very rarely. I don't use the color filters at all anymore.
And so there's some action pictures that you've taken, like of those sailboat. There's a whole collection of them on the in the portfolio. How do you how much pre-production is involved in this type of shoot? Because obviously you need a boat to go on, or even some images that we're going to see were captured from an helicopter, I think.
Yeah, there were quite a lot of production, but generally I'll go to a regatta where you have 50 of these wonderful yachts. I tend to favour the classic yachts, of which this is one. That means that they were yachts that have been around for 100 years or so. And I first saw, funny, I mentioned Lymington, this town I grew up in. I moved to when I was quite young. And Lymington is a sailing town. It's very well known for its sailing history. And there were a few shops in there that kind of dealt in nautical history and things like that, which I love. And I became aware of a family of photographers based on the Isle of Wight called Beacon of Cows, and they did some wonderful and they started sort of when photography was a baby really, and they used to go out in a little rowing boat and shoot some of the wonderful sailing boats. And I was very moved by these photographs, and they always stuck in my head. And it was wonderful when I discovered much later that most of these yachts, not all of them sadly, but most of these yachts were still around and still sailing, and they'd been taken on and renovated and they were still sailing. So it became a bit of a bug for me to go out and see them. And I discovered that you could go to a regatta. Now, around the world there's sailing regattas where they specialize in these classic yachts. So you would go to a place and the whole place would be taken over by yachts that are 100 years old or 50 years or whatever. And it's quite an incredible scene if you think some of them are 60, 80 feet long. The sails are beautiful. And so in terms of production, yes, I need a boat or I need a helicopter. I need something to get me out on the water. Because I like to shoot at a very low angle as well, it became very quickly. I like to get down low, and I like to shoot the sails or the boat with the light often behind it. So I found that by having my own skipper and boat, or pilot and helicopter, I could actually get what I wanted without having to sort of share the time on the water with other photographers. So I tend to do that. And yeah, it's an expensive thing to do, but it's necessary, and I can do a lot of pictures in 3 or 4 days. And then I have pictures to look at for the next 3 or 4 months, really, from the amount I actually shoot in that time.
So you also said in the previous question that I asked that you shoot for yourself, but yet you managed to make a living out of your photography. We didn't dive into how you became a professional photographer. Well, I'll get to that in a moment. But I suppose that this type of work, it's a huge investment up front. I mean, not the amateur photographer could actually pull that off, could it?
I suppose not. I mean, well, I suppose it depends. But it's it's a choice. It's an investment, and I think that one has to be sure of that. And I felt happy enough that the first time I went out and shot these boats, I went out. I went down to Saint-Tropez, and the Nautical Society of Saint-Tropez, who organised the regatta, put it on press boats. So I had to share a boat with 3 or 4 other photographers, and we went out, and that's when I really discovered that although I was able to get some of the things I was after, some of them I wasn't, because the sports sailing photographers were after a very different sort of light than I was. So I was able to get started, and those photographs I took on the first shoot became very quickly a 10-page article in Black and White Photography magazine, the UK magazine, and that really then became a springboard for other things. And so I realised that I perhaps caught onto something that had captured the imagination in many ways, and the prints started to sell very well and would be put into luxury hotels that were by the water, or people's holiday homes that were perhaps by the water in Florida or in Cape Cod or in the south of England somewhere. So they had a place, and so yes, I went out, and the next time I went, I invested, and I hired my own boat. The helicopter also is not cheap, but ultimately it's part of the sacrifice of what you have to do, and and actually doing it is the most incredible experience. And I don't want it to make it sound like it's a miserable thing. It's probably when I'm feeling the best is when I'm out on the water with these, or shooting down on them from a helicopter. It's the most incredible, revitalizing, exciting, frenetic pastime that one can experience, for me anyway.
That must be so challenging as well. I mean, I remember having a conversation with Joe Cornish when he did one of his trips to Antarctica, and he explained that he spent a lot of time on the Zodiac and speeding along the coast and taking some photographs, and how difficult it was to get stability. And as soon as you start looking through the camera, your sense of balance is really challenged, and so it's not easy to actually frame something. So do you see it as a challenge, or because you're now so used to being on the water, it's you basically like a fish in the water? You okay with it?
It's challenging. Of course it is. But that's part of the beauty of it. If it was easy, then everyone would do it. And also, if it was easy, it would cease to be challenging. But Joe is right. I have to remind you that I'm holding this generally with a bigger lens on it. And if you imagine that these sailing boats, although it looks very placid and stately in this photograph that you're showing, they can really move. And these wonderful boats, they don't sit on top of the water. They slice through the water like it's warm butter. They can just go through it. Whereas I tend to be in a boat that's what they call a rigid inflatable again, and so they tend to bounce on top of the water. And these things, as you can see behind this particular boat, they kick up a lot of wake. So you tend to be bouncing, and you tend to be going very fast to try and just keep up with them, because although they look like they're going in slow motion, they're in fact moving at sort of 25, 30 miles an hour, which is fast on the water. At the same time, you're down low trying to hold this very large and heavy piece of metal up against your face, then framing and thinking of everything else. Now, it's fun. It's really good fun, but I often, after a day's shoot, I'll go back to the hotel and I'll look at myself. I look like I've been in a boxing match. I'm just covered in bruises and cuts and all sorts of things, because when you're shooting, you don't realise. But this thing is just banging against your head constantly, and you have a bruise over your eye. And again, I don't feel sorry for me, because it's my choice, and it's wonderful fun. I love every second of it. But it's probably the physical challenge outweighs the artistic challenge. Just to get a picture is quite challenging. Funny enough, I came out with someone last year who wanted to come out with me, and a friend, and I said, yeah, come out, and he lasted maybe 2 hours, and he said, that's enough, I'm going back. So it's challenging, but it's great fun.
Are you actually harnessed to the boat, or no?
No, harness the helicopter, yes, because the helicopter generally they're these very small helicopters, which, there's a photograph here that was taken from the air. And it was shot with a 24 to 70 lens, so this one, so you can see I was actually pretty close to the boat. But this is all about the pilot, really. The pilot will get you in the right place, and this was this particular guy. I've used him since. He's wonderful. Tiny helicopter, and I'm not a small chap, and so I had to sort of fold myself to get up into the helicopter, and then the harness looked like it was a seatbelt from a 1973 Renault 4. It was just health and safety would have a field day, but we were harnessed in, and then he flies and then tilts the helicopter, so I'm basically facing down towards the sea, shooting out of an open doorway, and that's how these pictures come. And you normally go in about 40-minute shifts, so you'll go up for 40 minutes, then he'll come back and refuel, and then you'll go up again. Because it's such good fun, it really is. You just cannot think about anything else except for what you're doing. It's a wonderful experience.
So when you captured this one from the helicopter, did you have given the amount of pre-production and cost and investment, whatever we want to call it, do you have a specific image in mind, or you have more a concept and you go there and your concept is rather broad, as capturing the boat, the sailboat, and from above that would be cool, from the side would be cool, and that's as far as you go in terms of preparing, or do you have a specific image that you want to capture?
No, I don't. I'm very opportunist when it comes to photography. I don't pre-plan things. I maybe have a vague idea. I have a few sketches in my head that is the sort of thing that I like to do. And like, for example, with this sort of thing, which I love doing, and this is probably what I'm best known for, certainly, is these sail abstracts, which I love doing. I know that I want to go out and capture, basically I want to shoot the wind. I want to be able to photograph the wind, but of course one can't, so one photographs the results or the effect of the wind, and that's what I was trying to do with these very fine, beautiful pieces of fabric, the sails of these boats. But there's no preconceived idea of form or shape. It's just, I know the sort of rough sketch of what I want, and then everything else is just opportunism and just working as it happens, and just coming up with ideas as you see things literally unfurling. That's when the ideas come, and you start to get into the flow, and then you have to be able to switch just like that and think, well, okay, this sail isn't now working, so let's pull out a bit, and like in the last picture, and you can get a bit more of the boat, so you can suggest it. So you're working really on the run all the time, which is also very exciting.
Talking about the sea, the water, I wondered how engaged and involved are you with any environmental organization? I happened to look at your book description. So for those of you who don't know, Jonathan has a book called Silver, which I totally recommend to everyone, and this is definitely on my list. I'm going to get it before Christmas. But I went to the description, and there was the team. And in the team, I noticed that we have one of the songs of Captain Cousteau. And so we know of the Cousteau family and the foundation and what they do for the ocean. So I was wondering, are you involved in any way, providing material, doing any documentary for any environmental association? And what's your view on the environment and the impact of man onto the water?
Yeah, I do work with some charitable groups and conservation, but in a quiet way. I don't like to sort of go on about it too much. Certainly with what I do with my work, my method is to try and show people how I feel about the water, which is about the sea, which is generally beauty. We're so lucky to have so much of this planet covered in this wonderful stuff, and let's try and do our best to keep it like this. But I don't want to, my method isn't to take hard-hitting pictures of rubbish on beaches or, dead dolphins. That's not my approach either. I don't want to shock people. I want to make people look at a picture and think, God, that's beautiful. And if I can do that in any way, shape or form, then it's a very warming experience. I do donate prints for things for auctions and things, but try and do it in a quiet way. With Pierre-Yves Cousteau, who you were talking about, he also has a conservational company trust, and we try and do a bit with that. But it's not something I like to sort of broadcast too much. It's just we all know what we're supposed to be doing, and if we see the beauty, then let's try and keep it that way. Really, that's the message.
And do you have you noticed how much we have endangered the ocean at your level? Is that something that you notice as you travel the world?
Yes and no. I go to. I mean, here I live in an area where the beach is very important, and a lot of rubbish can be found on the beaches, but it doesn't come from here. It washes up on the beaches from elsewhere. So if one looks at the packaging, it's never French. It comes from other countries. So there's obviously things. There's so much that needs to be done. But I've also found that I go to places where the sea is remarkably clear. I was just in Mozambique for the second visit just before Christmas, and the sea is so much. There you go. There's a picture from that particular trip. The sea was so clean and so beautiful, and the people there the sea is part of their way of life, and it's important to them that it's kept that way. And of course, they don't have as much packaging. I think life is a lot simpler. So there's things that one can learn, and I think that packaging is. To reduce the packaging would go a long way to reducing the amount of impact of pollution on the sea, I think.
Mm. So there's one question that I haven't asked about your journey is we know that you managed to make a living out of photography, and it's hard. It's really hard nowadays. But how did you become a professional photographer? We learn about how you had this passion for the water, how you actually use photography as a means to record what you see, what you like, what you feel as emotion like. But how did you do that transformation from just an amateur to someone who makes a living out of it?
Well, in a nutshell, I tried first time when I was in my 20s, and I sort of discovered photography and the sea could come together in something for me. I tried back then to make a go of it, but I didn't have any business background, I didn't have any marketing background. So, and it was a challenge to do that, to suddenly go from being a lifeguard to someone who wanted to sell prints with absolutely no knowledge on how to do it. So I was left a little bit shocked by the whole thing back then, and because I think as a sort of young chap full of confidence and arrogance, I thought it was going to be easy. And of course, the reality is that it wasn't, and it isn't. If anything, it's harder now. So I was left really wondering what to do when I got offered a job with a surf company, an Australian company who had offices in the UK, and they wanted someone that could drive around when they were having surf competitions and take a few pictures and do a bit of marketing, sell a few T-shirts, that sort of thing. So I started off with them. It brought in some money. I was able to still take pictures, so it was quite good. And then forward the whole thing, I was asked then, after a couple of years of doing that, I sort of worked my way into the company more. I was asked to open up offices down here in France, which I did. At Hossegor, which is close to Biarritz, which is, as you said, a very famous surfing area. So I came down here, and the company got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I was spending less and less time by the water or with a camera, and more time in an office environment. And I finally reached the point when the company had grown an awful lot, and I realised I was earning a lot of money for other people, and realised also I hadn't taken a photograph in a long time, and realised most importantly that I'd learned a lot by this whole process. In 7 years of working for this company, I'd learned a lot about marketing, about working with magazines, about brands, and so I felt that perhaps the time was right to try again. And this time, so I handed in my notice, and I remortgaged the house to give us some stability for a year and a half. Bought the equipment that I needed, and off I went on my journey. But this time I realized that I could do it because I learned how to treat myself. No one's very comfortable about talking about themselves in that sort of way. And I realized that marketing is very important, but it's quite difficult to treat yourself that way. So I realized if I treated myself like a brand, and all those things I learned with the company, treat myself like a brand, and make sure that everything I did was built into that, follow my passions and my loves, and keep it all very close and very tight. I could make it work, and fortunately for me, I caught on to something that the fine art market was caught onto also, particularly the sale pictures and the sort of minimalism, the black and white. I got in just in time for an explosion, I think, in that sort of thing. Not the sale so much, but the sort of the square black and white thing. And very quickly became, because of some of the magazines, I got myself a name, and then that knocks on to something else. And maybe a gallery would contact you and say, I saw you in that magazine, I like what you're doing, come and have a chat. And it very quickly escalated. And at the same time, I started running workshops, just doing some coastal stuff down here, and then developed a company called Ocean Capture based on that, which is now in its 10th year and is doing incredibly well. We work with 6 or 7 different, there you go, thanks Tom, 6 or 7 different very talented photographers. I feel very humbled to be a part of the team, but it's a company I started which has really grown organically over the years, and the idea is that we take people to some wonderful water spots and share our passion with them, and we have some good time, good food, always great hotels, and the company's done really well. I'm very pleased. So to go back to your question, that's how it started, and really I think everyone knows that nowadays to earn a living from photography, one has to be prepared to try to do different things. It's not all from one particular revenue source. And I'm happy now that I have good, healthy print sales. I think altogether we do about 3,000 prints a year. Now that's across the board of all different ways. Some through galleries, some through online sales, some through this. But it's a good, healthy market. And then, of course, with Ocean Capture and then other things, image sales, so there's the rights to use an image, is also a healthy place to be. So altogether, it puts something together which enables us to live comfortably.
So you don't do commercial work per se, right? It seems that you create your images for you as with a view of selling the prints. But it turns out that some companies, some marketing department in companies may like to use your images for their brand or else, and that's how you actually sell the rights as well.
Yeah, exactly. I don't work on order. Everything that's out there is a picture that I'm sort of 100% happy with, that I've done in my own time, and then people have bought for either the rights to use it or the print or whatever it is. So I'll give you an example. Ralph Lauren, I'm lucky enough to be present in a lot of their stores, and my prints, sale prints, and a few horses are in their stores. I think the brands match. I think what I do matched up with their ideal, and but none of those pictures are ones that they've said, can you shoot us this, and we're going to send our art director down. They're all pictures that I've taken, which then they've said, yeah, this is the sort of thing that we want. So that's how it works generally across the board. I much prefer it that way. Like I said before, I've had enough of working for people. I just wanted to work for myself, and then that way I think it's the mistakes that I make will be mine, and therefore I hold myself completely accountable for that, and then one can change and try and adapt if one can. But fortunately I didn't have to change my thinking too much. Everything I shoot is something I feel very passionate about, and hopefully, and I think that's part of the reason why that it works, and people see that and recognize that, which makes having one of those photographs that much more acceptable.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand that. I remember Joe saying that because he was doing some commission work, and he was no longer doing for commercial work per se. He was doing for trust still nowadays, but not for commercial, because he was tired of having to shoot deep blue sky and frame things in a way that people could add text onto the photograph, and at the end it becomes the whole concept was really almost with the final product in mind, rather than the artwork itself and capturing the scene as you would normally do as an artist.
No, absolutely.
So we saw the work that you've done with the waves, with the water, with the but you've done other work as well, still where the water is involved, but you let another type of subject in, the horses. You've done a few series of horses, different places in the world, but interestingly, the water is still present, and the clouds.
And the clouds, yeah, no, the water is, I mean, although these don't look it, these are the horses, the white horses down in the Camargue, and these were the first horses I started working with, and this came very much from, again, back to my childhood, actually, where I was on a beach somewhere with my parents, and I noticed some waves were breaking, and noticed the white foam on top of the wave. You're going to show that wave picture now. Look at you, Tom, you're such a professional.
Thank you.
So the white water, and I said, what's all that stuff? And my father, I think, said, well, we call that white horses. And of course, that's an expression that the English use to talk about this and to describe this. And just as a small boy sitting on that beach, I thought, wow, white horses, what a wonderful thing. That's a metaphor in my mind. It was just started working overtime. I could imagine these white horses just running in. And that sort of stayed with me. I don't know if you remember, I don't know if you were in Britain then, Tom, but a few years back, back in the 90s, I think, there was an advert for Guinness on TV.
Oh, yes, beautiful one. I see the one.
Which was all shot in black and white, and they had these sort of horses running in from. Well, that came out, and of course that reminded me of them, and I thought, God, I started to get, obviously I kept in touch with photography, and I thought, I wonder if that's still possible, and I put the idea away, and then someone told me about the Camargue, and then the horses there who had adapted to live in a very sort of salty environment and were white, and I started going down there to shoot, and I've been going there now for 8 or 9, almost 10 years, and always a wonderful thing to do.
So is this in the sea, or is it in kind of a pond?
This is in a lagoon, actually. It's salty water, but it's luckily very shallow. You can see that the horses, they're quite far out here, and maybe 30 or 40 meters out in the water. But again, you talked about production earlier. I mean, the horses wouldn't do this necessarily naturally. I mean, they do sometimes, but you would have to follow them for months to actually get them to see them do this. So there are a team of people involved in putting the horses there. And once again, I'm aware that although I don't take pictures of many people, there are many people involved in the taking of the picture. And that's certainly the case here, because what you don't see to the left and to the right are the horse people who are leading these horses through. So there's a lot of people involved in doing this sort of thing, but it's such a wonderful thing, very emotive to see the horses and hear the horses in the water, and they love it. It's exercise, it's fun. They can let off steam, and they always roll when they get back on the shore afterwards. They'll roll to dry themselves off and have a good old time. So it's a wonderful thing to do. We enjoyed it so much that I started running workshops down there to do it, because other people, I think, I'd love to do that. So we ran a few workshops down there.
What do they breed the horses for? Is there a particular usage in the region?
Well, they breed them to sell. The horses that are very, very good natured, very, very kind horses, very inquisitive. They're really a lot of fun, and so they use them a lot to breed, to sell for stables and riding schools and that sort of thing. They're also a very strong, very, very hardy horse, so they're bred for that too. But also, it's become part of the tourism in the area, so people come down to the Camargue to see the horses and to ride them. You can just, as a beginner, you can just sit on a Camargue horse and they'll just take you through the marshlands and along the beaches, which is a wonderful thing to do. So it's become a symbol, or at least one of the symbols of the Camargue area. And those of you who don't know, the Camargue is close to Marseille. It's the delta of the Rhone River. So it's a very flat, marshy sort of area, but very beautiful. And one thing one has to contend with generally is mosquitoes. And luckily for the area, in certain ways, there's a wind that blows down through that area, which I'm sure you've heard of, called the Mistral. And that tends to keep the mosquitoes at bay, so you don't feel their impact so much. In the taking of this picture, you'll look at the reflections and you'll realize there wasn't a lot of wind. So although I look back at most of my pictures of very fond memories, the one I have of this one, the reoccurring one, is of the scratching that went on when I got back to the hotel room, because I've been bitten to death by mosquitoes that were present because there was no wind. But it's a wonderful place to be, and I love going. The people are absolutely amazing, and it's a great area, so I advise you to go down there.
I find this image interesting for a couple of reasons. The first one is from an artistic point of view. It's very, I don't know, because of the reflection and those long legs that it gives to the horses, it makes me think of Dali's work, something that melts a bit and almost a bit extraterrestrial as an effect. But the other thing that catch my eye is, I think it's supposed to do with your approach to post-production. I'm, for one, who tend to clean as much as I can when I see anything that's going to caught my eye, that catches it, something that would be very bright, for example, in a dark environment, and vice versa. And what I'm referring to here are these bits in the water. And I find it interesting that you deliberately decided to leave them on. So I just wanted to point that out to people who actually watch this this discussion, to see that actually there are different approaches to post-production, and how much you do in terms of cleaning in the scene, or leaving it as virgin as it can be. So it's interesting.
It is, and I mean, very briefly, the reason for that, I mean, of course I could have got rid of those. All it is mud. I mean, it's just mud where the horses have been walking around and just kicked up a bit of mud. And, one looks at it and one thinks, well, I could. But there's an expression which I like, which is perfect imperfections. And I in my photographs, there are imperfections because nothing's perfect. And to make it so would seem... I'm not looking for that. I like to leave traces of although this picture in itself, because I've left a lot of space, and it's very high key, so that it has a sort of almost a dreamy aspect with the reflections. But I think the mud just kind of ties it back to reality, and that little strip of land on the right hand side that you can see just in the very, very background, that it just ties it back into reality a little bit, and I think that's important. I don't know why it's important for me, but it's important for me to do that.
No, but that's interesting. I mean, it's a viewpoint on photography, and everybody has his own approach to it, and that's surely interesting to see this. We stay with the horses, and because we saw the white horses, but there are also some dark horses. I'm not sure they are from Camargue, but this one, really, I found it so interesting, because once again, knowing that your organic way of shooting, which I can definitely relate to, it's when we see his neck and how the hair just wrapped around his neck like this. First off, it's a huge neck compared to a tiny head, and that's signs of a big male macho guy. But it's interesting how you capture that. Was there movement, or was it brushed that way? Or you mentioned the team that was around you? So how much prep did go into that photo?
No, this is a Frisian horse. So the Frisian horse is from the Netherlands, and they are famous for their size and stature. They are absolutely enormous. I mean, I'm 6'2" and I look up at their heads. I mean, I'm looking up at them. They are the most imposing, statuesque horses. Just look like they're pure black. Look like they're carved out of ebony. It's just absolutely wonderful. And so this is a stallion, working with a stallion, and he, as you said, his neck and his musculature. I mean, you can't see in this picture, but the muscles in his shoulders and his chest are just very impressive. And he was it's just me and him in a sort of ring, I suppose, outside. And I was down, so I could just put the sky behind. That's just the sky that you can see behind. And he was just looking at me and then sniffing around and then throwing his head around. It was all a sort of display for some of the mares in another field, And I was just able to capture this for an hour and a half or so, just kind of kept following him. And some of the stuff that I was shooting was rubbish. And then sometimes you just get the right movement where everything was in the right place. And this picture, as you said, what I liked about this was the mane, and just the way it kind of almost swirls around, and it made me think, funny enough, of that sail picture that you showed earlier on, where the sail was slightly twisted. It gave me the same sort of feeling as that. So that one. I don't know why. I'm very well done. God, you're good. It gave me the same sort of sensation with the space around it. You'll see that this is. Very rarely for me, this picture on the left, the horse picture, is not a square. I really tried, but it just didn't work. So this is stayed in its original 5x4 format. But I think it works for this picture. And you'll see I use a little bit of vignetting. You can see it on both those pictures, in the sailing and on the horse picture. If you look at the corners, you'll see there's a bit of vignetting, which is very very old school, but a bit of grain and a bit of vignetting. I love it. It tends to be quite prevalent in my work.
And great reflection on the eye as well. It's interesting. We've got this white spot in the eye just at the edge against the blackness of his hair in the back. Gives a good contrast. We see really nice lines on his head. It's remarkable. And talking about the eye as well, I've got a challenge for you guys watching this this video. There is one image on in Jonathan's portfolio. It's a dark horse. I don't tell you which series it is, but it's a dark horse, and we can see a reflection of another horse inside the eye. So here's your challenge. You got to go to Jonathan's website, and if you don't know it, it's JonathanChritchley.com, and go to his portfolio, to one of the series, and find me that picture of that horse that has a reflection in his eyes, and give me in the comment the name or the title of that image. Just want to check if you go to his website. So here we go. So we go from this horse to another horse, which I found as an image very both tricky and yeah, I don't know what other words to use, but I'm gonna change, if you don't mind, I'm gonna change the background to dark. And I'll let you guys appreciate it. If you don't see anything, if you only see a black rectangle, then I think it's time for you to invest in a calibration tool, whatever that might be, whether it's a Color Monkey display, that's just because I use this, it's not a product placement, but buy something to calibrate your display, because this is not a pure black dot, this is not modern art. There is a horse in there, and I find it very daring to have created this, especially knowing that you sell print afterwards, and I print myself, and I can't imagine how difficult it is to promote this this piece here, because you need to have a perfect light and to avoid any reflection on the glass, perfect paper as well to render properly the texture, the mood. Can you tell us about your approach, why you did it, and do you actually understand when I say it's daring?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I very much motivated by minimalism, and I like things. Something's funny to the bottom left-hand corner. It looks like it's not square in this, but it is actually. I don't know what's happened. Something's happened in the process. But anyway, I do like minimalism. Of course, minimalism can come in lots of different shapes and forms and ideas. And I was thinking about Matisse and some of the work, the etchings he'd done, the engravings he'd done with on a black background with hardly anything, just some white lines, which I really loved. I was very moved by. And also Picasso had done some sketches on black ink, just one line. It created a shape of different animals, a horse and a bird and all sorts of things. So I was thinking about that and thinking that idea in my head, I suppose, had been just playing around. And then I thought, I wonder if I can do something working with these horses that I'm friends with. There's a very, very wonderful French photographer called Vincent Mounier, who's a wonderful wildlife photographer. But he works a lot in the Arctic, in the snow countries, and he does these very high key pictures of things like Arctic foxes and things. So where it's all white, and you just see the sort of black outline of the ears and of the eyes. And I was thinking about his stuff. I know the guy. He's a wonderful chap. And so I was thinking about these horses and whether I could do something that was dark. And so I thought I'd try it. And this was in Friesland in the Netherlands, and putting the horse into a stable, just underexposing it, and then just playing a little bit in post-production, just with contrast and just dodging and burning things, just to really take out anything that was behind the horse, just leaving the head. And the idea was that you would have to look twice. You maybe would think it was just a black square, and then you look at it and you think, hang on a minute, I can just about see something looking out at me. And to print it was a complete nightmare, actually, Tom. And but when it works beautifully well. It has to be hung in a place that there is not a lot of light, because you need to be, you need to, and non-reflective glass and all that sort of thing. The first time I'd done it, I thought I'll put it on. I don't use Facebook that much, but I put it on Facebook, and I said, if you're looking at this picture outside on an iPad, the chances are you'll think I've gone mad, and you're just looking, as you said, just at a black square. But the reaction to it was pretty good. I don't ever do that generally, but it probably reflects the fact I was thinking, am I completely mad doing this? I like to get a little bit of feedback, and consequently, this has done really well for me as a print. But I have to be very careful on how it's done. You're right.
Do you actually print your own work? Do you do it yourself, or do you use a lab?
It depends on how big it is. When I first started, I printed everything because the prints that I was selling were smaller, maybe up to A3. So I was doing everything myself, and that was great. But then the whole, I don't know, it was my work that changed, and people wanted to see it in a different way, or the whole, or just whether my market just developed into something else. But I started having requests for much bigger prints, so I now generally do 2 sizes in limited edition prints. One which is sort of a bit smaller, and then one oversized, massive sort of statement print. And those ones I don't print myself, although they are printed to my specification on the paper I use, and then sent back to me to check and to sign and to do everything. So it really depends on what size it is. But if it's not printed by me personally, it's certainly printed, by people who I trust. And one thing I should mention also that is one of the reasons that I liked the darkroom was that if someone ordered a print, I would be able to take the negative and I would run it through the process and print it on a piece of paper, and it would come out the other end, as a handmade print. And I like that process. And I was uncomfortable when I started working digitally. I was uncomfortable with that idea that you just do one sort of master file, and then when someone orders a print, you just press play. Really, you just press print and it prints out. So I thought, no, I mean. That's fair enough, but my prints aren't particularly cheap, and I thought, well, no, I don't want that to be just like a laziness. So what I do, and this is entirely me, and basically I can only do this because my processing is so short. I reprocess every photograph that's ordered as a print from the raw file, like on order, if you like.
Wow.
So if there's a limited edition of 12. Each one of those prints of those 12 has been reprocessed from the digital negative and taken through from start to finish. And so, which means that if you put all 12 of those prints side by side, there would be slight differences in each one, because I might be feeling slightly different. So the contrast might be a bit different on one, or the style might be a bit different. But they're all, of course, I have one that I look at, which is a sort of guide, as you would in the darkroom. But there is a slight variation, and I'm quite comfortable with that. I like that idea. And if my processing method, as some people I've worked with, they love sitting in front of a computer and they'll process 3, 4, 5 days, with 472 layers open, that would drive me insane. But at the same time, I wouldn't be able to do this. I'd be forever in front of a computer. But I feel happy that I can do that, and it feels like an honest, a darkroom sort of thing. It feels like it's handmade. And even so, those prints that I'm not actually printing, the bigger prints, it's still taken up to that point by me and then just sent off and the print sent back to me.
So you really push the boundaries of limited edition in that case, right? Even if it's a 12 copy limited edition, then you're actually doing one limited edition, but you're putting yourself to do 12 times.
In a way, you're right. I mean, it's but I like that. As I said, I feel comfortable with that. It's just a personal thing, and people that buy the prints like it as well, because they are aware that they've got something that no one else has got, and that's really surely the point of it. That's what it's about.
No, I once again, I really appreciate that, because the print work that I do, so I print myself, and just like you said, I print up to A3 format. I do A4 and A3, but I mount it. So the mat I created myself, so I've got a tool for it. I don't actually just buy the mats made by an industrial company. So that gives a little bit of a craft feel to it.
Absolutely, completely.
And it's not perfect. And God knows, when you work with paper, you just realize, and I think we are same in a way that we try to be as how to put it nicely, that we're very hands-on, and we try to get the perfection, even if we don't get the perfection. And sometimes when you deal with paper, it's a total nightmare, because you deal with something and you really want to have A3, and you really want to have the perfect size, and there's a millimeter off, and it just drives you nuts. But maybe that's just me.
Not just you.
So next, traveling the world. I mean, a lot of images that we've seen so far were captured in France, the Netherlands for the horses.
Mm-hmm.
Was actually the 2 black horses, were they the 2 same, or in the same series?
So two different horses, 2 different days, 2 different horses, but similar. You're right, and putting those 2 side by side, they're in a similar position, but no, you'll see that they're actually, the face is different on the other. No, they're 2 different horses, and very close. The stables are very close together, but they're not the same one. I do travel a lot, and I get around. I like to shoot in France. There's a lot here for me because I can shoot the horses, I can shoot the sails, I can do some seascapes and all sorts of things here. But of course, I do love to travel, and if it's got water, generally, it's somewhere I'm very, very drawn to.
Mm. In the introduction that I've done of this video the other day, I mentioned how you always manage to convey tranquility and space in your images, and I find there is somehow something very Asian in your work, and I don't know if it's because I'm always thinking of Chinese pictures or Japanese pictures that we can find sometimes, and it's very much monochrome sometimes. They do put colors, but the way they put colors is very subtle. But it's more of the line, and also something to do with calligraphy a little bit. And I find that your work reminds me a lot of that. Even when it's something that has nothing to do with it when you look at it. But once again, for me, when I look this picture here, it's the lines that speak to me more than the image itself, if you see what I mean. Is that something that you're looking for? Are you attracted to, obviously black and white, it's all to do with contrast and tint, but are you attracted to lines in your scenery?
Yeah, shapes and lines more than anything else. As I said earlier on, it's very much, doesn't matter what I'm shooting, I'm always looking for something that's a strong shape. And with something like this, yes, the lines, the ropes are wonderful. And I don't often use sort of leading lines and things. I'm not a purveyor of that, particularly to bring you into a scene. I prefer to use contrast for that rather than something obvious. But in this case, it was too good to miss because it just did remind me of like an ink stroke, just almost of those Picasso thin lines I was talking about earlier on. These wonderful lines that could have been done with a paintbrush or something. And I was, this sort of picture, yes, I saw it from the shore. I waded out almost up to my chest with the camera just to try and get this picture, and became aware of the shape. There's this diagonal shape, this kind of S shape that you get from the mast and the thing. Shape is very important to me more than light, more than anything else. It's the shape. If I can get the shape that I'm happy with, then I'm very happy.
Yeah. And we see it is even in here. I mean, the tranquility. I think that's really what resonates to me in this picture. Obviously, a long exposure, and the gradient. We see the gradient. You use a kind of a constant approach to your photography, with probably the exception of the sailboat in action, because it wouldn't play in that. But very often, I find that you use the gradient, and once again, we've got those lines, the pattern. You mentioned pattern earlier on. That was very important to you. You were trying to capture that. What is this? Is that oysters, an oyster bay, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Do me a favour, Tom. Just put the background into white.
Yes, I'll do it. There we go.
So the reason I do that, I was telling Tom this the other day. The reason I do this, I always, if I'm working, have the background in white, is because, of course, the picture is going to be printed on white paper, and how, especially in black and white, how the contrast looks on white tends to be very different to how it looks on other shades behind it. So I tend to work on a white background, and I'm sorry, Tom, to make you
that's all right. I appreciate that.
So yeah, this was again back in France, on the south coast, on the Mediterranean coast, close to a place called Sète, and these are oyster beds, and there's a whole bay just filled with these, and it's the most wonderful location. But what isn't so easy is to get the angle, because I'm up high here to shoot down on top of them. If you're down at sort of water level, you can't see that there's so many of them. You're just looking at the first line of them. You can't see what's behind. So again, this was people being involved in the shot, although not appearing in it. I was speaking to some of the fishermen, some of the oyster culturists, and explained what I wanted to do, and they just let me sort of go on their roof or up a cliff that they happen to own, and they were very intrigued by the fact that I wanted to do this. And well, I was showing them the pictures afterwards, and they were, and it's very different, and the whole reaction. And again, I have to say that it's, when I look back at a lot of these pictures, often I think back to the people who are involved in them, and generally people are so nice and so helpful, and can't quite understand why I just wanted to put so little into a photograph, but still you can sort of say, well, you're this crazy English guy, but let's help him out. And so it happens a lot, and this picture was no exception to that. Yeah.
So then, I just mentioned how much your work reminds me of Asia in general, and I've noticed that you've taken some beautiful photos in China, and especially this one. And I've seen work of that particular region because these fishermen are very famous with the birds. Can't remember how the birds are called. I know in French, but I can't. Is it the same word in French?
Same word, cormorant and cormorant. Yeah, it's the same word.
All right. And one thing that I've read about these fishermen is that now it's getting very popular. I've seen tons of pictures in that region, but is it true that the fishermen actually can't make a living out of the fishing anymore, and it's mostly photographers that would basically pay them to pose that would help them with a life?
Probably. I mean, I can't tell you that I got into a conversation with the fishermen, but yeah, probably. Just to go back to your point, just because one sees a lot of something photographically doesn't mean it can't be done in a different way. And I've never really been challenged by that. I shoot a lot in Venice, and Venice must be one of the most photographed cities on the planet, I would think. And yet, it's still, again, it comes back to something being challenging. It's good to go there and try and do something a bit different. And so, with these fishermen, again, it's a wonderful experience. This is 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, just the sun just starting to come up. This guy was employed by me to be there, and so a bit like the horses, it's a production. But it is representative of something that happened in this part of the world for a lot of years. And I would doubt, as you said, that this man would earn a living from catching fish. He probably feeds his family 3 or 4 times a week from it. But of course, yeah, he's adapted, like we all adapt, and his income comes from different revenue sources, a bit like mine. So fair play to him. What I do remember, Tom, from this particular shoot is that I remember shooting this. It was absolutely silent and very beautiful. And I remember thinking at one point, this is like something that could have happened 300 years ago. This scene. There's nothing in it that gives anything away that it's the 21st century. And the second, and I promise you, the second that I thought that, this sound broke through the silence, which went diddle diddle. And it's this guy's mobile phone in his back pocket of his and he took it was his wife apparently on the phone. There was a guide with me who was explaining, and she was very cross with him because he's supposed to be back for breakfast at 4:30 or something. And he took off his sort of traditional costume, and underneath he had a Manchester United football top on, which I thought was really fun.
Dream match.
But it's again, it's the story, isn't it? I mean, that's what I look at when I think of this, and it makes me smile. But it's good. I like it.
And interestingly, you're not going to be surprised the next picture that I'm going to select.
Colour.
It's colour.
Yeah, sure.
Did you get mad? Did you lose your mind?
Yeah, but blue, it's blue, isn't it? I mean, blue's okay. Blue's not really colour. Blue's just on its own. It's there is blue. I love blue. I think obviously the whole sea thing, and I like I love the whole thing. I love everything blue. And when I took this, I remember thinking I like the orange against the blue. And I remember thinking, I wonder if this will work in black and white. Most things do, but I just thought, I wonder if it did. And it didn't have the contrast. If you look at the picture on the right, you can see that I put the fisherman in that sort of spot of the light, which was behind the mountains. So I managed to get, with a bit of moving around, a bit of cooperation, I managed to get him to the spot I wanted. But with this guy, this was even earlier, this particular on the left-hand side. This was a different occasion, a different year, but
so it's not even the same session.
Not even the same session. No, I think this one was maybe 2 years earlier, and it was a very different sort of. It was very foggy, very foggy. There was no real light source except for the light on the back of the raft. And so, consequently, I put it into black and white, and I was messing with contrast and everything. It kind of worked, but I just kept coming back to the blue, and this is very much what the raw file looked like, to be honest with you. And I just thought, well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I guess I like it, and it just sort of still fitted in with what I do. It's still because it's a sort of monochrome in a way, although it be a blue one. There's not a lot of colour in it, but yeah, I just do like it.
It's very interesting, and as a side note for you guys, you may remember a few weeks ago now, I did a video about a tutorial on split toning, And very shortly, I mentioned the use of opposite color, which are actually complementing. And here, one reason why it works is that you've got this blue and against this yellow, which are two opposite color that complement each other very well. And I think that helps quite a lot here in the reading of your photograph. That looks absolutely stunning.
Thank you.
You mentioned Venice, and this is probably one of the most amazing picture I've seen of Venice, because we all seen pictures of Venice on daytime, very beautiful blue in the sky, which I tend to hate, with not a single cloud in it, and those really pinkish building. But here you gave it a tone that it's, to me, I don't know if you shot this in winter, but this is exactly what I would expect it to look like in the winter when everybody has left and you start having the flooding in December. Was that the case? Was that taken at that time of the year?
Absolutely. I go to Venice a lot. I love it there, and I've been going there since I was quite small. Well, about 12, it's a special place. But as I said earlier, it's been photographed a lot, and I also don't like the blue skies and things. And so yeah, I always go in winter. I normally go in November or January, sometimes December also. So it's generally quite cold. The high tides, as you said, the Aqua Alta, the high tides, and also mist, which for someone who likes to simplify an image is gold dust. I love, if there's a mist around, I'm feeling incredibly happy. And this was a combination of mist and rain on this particular day. This is just from the Academia. No, not Academia. It's from Rialto Bridge, actually. So this is at the back of. So one way from Rialto Bridge, you look sort of up the Grand Canal. It's a very sort of sweeping, wonderful thing. But this was from the back of it, and I just noticed these four posts. And I shot this picture the year before, and there was no mist. And although it was quite nice, I just didn't quite sit with me. And then, of course, I went back, and the mist was there, or the fog actually. It was much more than a mist. And you could barely see the buildings behind when I first started shooting. This was very early in the morning, and little by little, the buildings started just to emerge. And I think I took maybe 8 photographs. Each one was maybe 30 seconds exposure. And then this was towards the end, I think, when you just saw enough of the building to understand that there was something there. But I quite like the fact, something I do a lot in my photographs is put something down one side of a picture and then have space on the other side, just a lot of negative space. So you see that almost a third of this picture is really pretty much nothing. Just that building just kind of coming through and nothing in the water. But all the action is really on the left-hand side. And again, it's telling that story but not finishing it. You know, there's something around that corner maybe, or there's those buildings. It's that sort of slight suspense or tension, which I quite like.
And I don't know if you've heard, I was watching the French news a few days ago, and they mentioned Venice because they are doing, they're quite concerned at the moment. The council is quite concerned about how much the tourism has grown, and they've been letting people rent their apartment and bedrooms and so on, and now there's like too much hotels, too much accommodation for rent, and they've decided to give a stop to that. So now they refuse any new application for renting and letting apartment in Venice, and they're even thinking of actually charging tourists to go into the Citadel. So I don't know if you've heard of that, but.
Well, I think the biggest problem, very briefly, is the cruise ships in Venice. Because if you're someone, you go to Venice and you stay in a hotel for 3 or 4 days, and you're going to invest in Venice. You'll stay in a hotel. You pay hotel tax for staying there. You maybe will use a local restaurant. You'll go and have a drink in a bar. So you're putting money back into the town, into the city. But what happens is the cruise ships will come, and you'll have 700 people getting off a cruise ship, and they come in there for maybe 6 hours. And they don't buy anything, they don't do anything, they bring their packed lunch with them, and they walk through, they kind of invade, they get in all the pictures, and they don't spend a penny, and then they get back on the boat and they go again. And this whole, I don't know if you've been to Venice, you've seen one of the cruise ships, and it just takes over. It's ridiculous. And the wake from those cruise ships is causing all sorts of problems with the foundations of the buildings, which were, very old. So I think for me, I can understand their aggravation in Venice, but I think that would be the thing to do something about. If that was stopped, I think Venice would be a lot nicer place to live and to visit.
I think the problem where they were concerned was the fact that people are deserting Venice. The number of inhabitants has dramatically reduced, and now they say there's only 5,000 people living in there, and so that's actually owners. So they don't necessarily live there. So there's actually just a few hundred people actually living, really living in the town, and all the others are just owners that own the flats or rent it. So there's the whole day-to-day life has totally is bound to vanish and become a museum city anymore.
That's just, they need a balance. I mean, I'm sure that, there are times when they're very grateful for the tourism money. They have to get the balance right. And it's like anywhere, you don't want it to become a sort of film set. You want there to be a real life going on. And it still has that, but yes, they'll have to control it for sure.
And to somehow to end this, because we've been at it for an hour and 20 minutes. I appreciate you taking the time, giving us all this insight on your work. One image that caught my eye, and I also noticed that in your portfolio it says that it's sold out. And I was quite intrigued by this image because at first I thought it was captured in Asia, and it wasn't. It's in France. And to me that was interesting to show that you actually don't necessarily need for people who are actually viewing this video and that don't have a big budget and don't travel the world, and there is beauty around the corner, that's I usually say, but then I'm lucky enough to live in Scotland, which is my favorite country of all, but that was shot in France, and the mood of it is not what you would necessarily think of France, although I could definitely think of some work done by Monet that kind of reflect the mood that you have in this scenery.
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all. Very nice words you're saying. This could be also in the UK. This could be, it could be in Canada. It could be these sort of scenes exist everywhere. What's the important, integral thing about this picture is the mist again, and I think that's the fog, because it is a heavy. This place is 5 minutes from where I'm talking to you now. It's just up the road from me. I'm shooting a bridge down a little stream, and you can just barely see another bridge in the distance. Well, I must have crossed that bridge it's the road to the beach. I must have crossed that bridge 1,000 times, and I probably would have walked past this scene or driven past it or cycled past it that many times and not even stopped. But then there's times you go past it and you think, God, that mist, look at that mist. And it's a sea mist that had just come in. And it just changed everything. It changed everything. It changed the whole feel of the picture. And right place, right time. Now, if I'm lucky enough to live in a place where I can shoot, so if I'm sitting here in my studio and then I suddenly see there's a mist coming in, I think, great, I know exactly where I'm going to go. There's plenty of places I can go and shoot. And I think that to have that local knowledge and of locations is very important. And that's really what happened here. It's nice mist coming, and I know where I'm going to go. And that's what happened with this, and it's pretty. It's quite. It's slightly unusual for me because it actually has got some sort of leading lines in it, which I apologise for. But it still has, hopefully, as you said, a sort of slightly Eastern feel with that. But I like it, and it was quite a long time ago. This one. I like this picture.
Does that mean that as long as there would be mist in the scenery, we could be in the middle of Hertfordshire and you could still take a shot?
Sure. Excuse me. Sorry. No, I think so. And I think, it depends. You have to like the sort of things I like. You have to like the sort of slightly grey, murky sort of conditions. But yeah, I think that these in the UK I go back quite a lot. So I have a lot of family there, and I've been there on very misty days and along a river, and even along the Thames. Sometimes you get some wonderful mist, and you just have this whole atmosphere. It just adds a whole different sort of feel to it, a stillness and a softness, which is very intriguing, I think.
But it has to have water. That's the.
It does for me. Yeah, it might not for you. I mean, trees again look wonderful in mist, don't they? But the water is the thing for me. Sure. I will. When I look at this picture, it's that sort of shape and form which I really like. The whole thing, the reflections and everything again.
And strangely, although you always need water. Nice transition there, mate.
Oh yeah, great. Thanks for this. Yeah.
We have these, which are not famous for really being very close to the water, but there's always a river, right? They always need to drink. So
I just threw you that, didn't I? I threw you that just so you could ruin me with it. All right, so yeah, okay, hands up. So this doesn't have water, but it does have space, and I do go to Africa quite a lot. I have another business based over there, and I go quite a lot. And this was in South Africa, and a friend of mine has a lovely safari lodge, and we were there, and I don't do much wildlife except for the horses. I don't. I'm very aware that wildlife photographers, because I know a lot of them, have enormous patience and will sit for 3 or 4 weeks even in a spot. I was speaking to a wildlife photographer, Greg Dutoit, in South Africa, and he actually stayed in a waterhole for 7 weeks to try and get the shot that he had in his mind. So I feel quite guilty about this picture that I went out on a morning shoot with a driver and basically got down on a canvas, lay on my belly, and within 3 minutes, these giraffe had come up fairly close. This was again shot with a 24-70 lens. They'd come up close to see what I was because they saw something. He pulled the car away, and I was just basically me left with the owner of the place on this canvas, and these guys came out, were looking around, and as they started to get closer, and this one in front, who was obviously the bravest one, I thought, God, they're just about to make a very nice shape if this carries on. And they carried on, and then suddenly they stopped, and they were all looking, all the heads were going in different directions. And again, you can just see behind there's a mist on the hills. It had been raining the day before. And they all came together. And 7 minutes later, I was back in the truck and we went back for breakfast. So it all happened in about 7 minutes. And when I showed the picture just in the back of my camera to some of the people at the lodge, and I'm like, oh my God, people would have camped out for weeks to get something like that. So I feel a bit guilty. But again, it shows that I'm very opportunist. I wouldn't have camped out for 7 weeks. It's not my sort of thing. But at the same time, it is possible to take pictures that can be very unusual and have something just purely by luck. And as long as you're ready for it and you can react and you know your equipment well enough, you can just react and get it. And again, with this picture, I try to make it as much me as possible by putting a lot of space, a lot of sky, and most of the action is in the sort of bottom third or half of the picture. It's black and white and it's square, so it has me ingredients in it, but it's absolutely, as you said, it couldn't be further from the water. I don't think it's a long way from that.
And so, what about the one on the right? Because obviously that's not the same country, right? That's Mozambique on the right.
Yeah, it's Mozambique. Yeah, this was, you talked about that whole Asian influence, and this was something that was very much in my mind. And again, this was. And I'm just so sorry, but in a very opportunist moment, because I've been out shooting with some of the fishing dhows. You showed a picture of a dhow earlier on that was very similar to the sort of thing I was doing on this trip. And I come back, and it was still quite early, 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:30, I think, and I came back to that very, very beautiful hotel. Was sat on this little terrace having breakfast, and this bird, the bird that you would that's the sort of boat I was doing, and that's in Zanzibar, but it's a very similar sort of thing. And I come back and was having breakfast on this terrace, and then this bird just was there, and it was very soft, still water, and the reflection. And I probably moved maybe a foot to my left, reached down to my camera, took the picture, took 3 or 4 pictures, put my camera back, the bird flew off, and that was it. I carried on with my breakfast. And it was one of those moments which I'll never forget, but it was just purely right place, right time. And I'm very grateful for the bird. But I don't do a lot of bird stuff. But this one, I think it's more about what the bird represents. It's just that sort of stillness of everything. Very beautiful moment, and the breakfast was wonderful. You'll be pleased to hear.
And it's interesting how you actually included the branches from the top, which very often we have a tendency of trying to fight against the branches and not have them peeking through the images. And there's one famous picture of you in the Japanese temple as well, where you use a branch to lead towards the subject. Okay, I'm going to show it, guys. Here we go. It's right here. But I'll let you guys go to Jonathan's portfolio to see it. But once again, I like the way how you introduce the branch like this, which is not common, I would say. Not common at all. So that concludes our journey through your own journey, your approach. I hope you guys understand a little bit better how Jonathan approaches photography and what moves him, and little stories that we we've learned behind some of these shots, which I find as interesting as the shots. And it's always the same, right, Jonathan? When we capture something and everybody has his own interpretation of your own work, and sometimes to us, when we look at our own picture, it actually tells us a little bit more. Like for you, when you think of the fisherman, you remember the phone rings and these kind of things that adds this little nostalgia or souvenir of the location, which is different from anybody else, because obviously they would not know what happened on that day.
You're right, absolutely.
So thank you so much for opening the doors to that. The next step before we partake is to look at what you guys have sent me, submitted. As I said earlier, there were about 117 images that were submitted. So that means how much you how much you love Jonathan, or how much the monochrome work inspires you. And I think in either way, it's very interesting, especially in nowadays where we are polluted, I would say, and I'm not shy to use the word polluted, by vibrant, oversaturated images of on social medias. It seems that the more vibrant an image is, the best it is, which repulses me, to be honest. So it's nice.
Don't hold back. You just say what you think.
I just feel like for once monochrome, although I never shoot monochrome, it's very rare when I do monochrome work, but I just feel it's nice. It's a nice break from this colorful world that we live in, and all this vibrance just pollutes it, as far as I'm concerned. So I've received 117. I had to select 10, and I must admit I struggled to get the 10. And if you're not among the 10, if your photograph is not among the 10, doesn't mean that it's not good. Far from it. 10 was my rule, and it was difficult. And at the end of the day, it came down to my personal preference. And also what I thought was a good match for Jonathan. So what I've done is I've actually taken the 10, I took the 10 photos and I've sent them to Jonathan, and he saw them as I see them in Lightroom. And so his review is based on the original image and not on what he's going to see, because currently he sees my screen through Skype. So if you were wondering whether his interpretation is based on the bad rendition of Sky, it's not. So without further ado, here are the 10 photographs, and we've got some portraits, we've got some landscape work from France, from other part of Switzerland as well, and we've got some Thailand, and also Canada. So very interesting work. What did you think, Jonathan, of the overall selection?
Yeah, I mean, wonderful. I mean, you obviously handpicked pictures that I would find interesting, but still they're very diverse and really good. I mean, there's some wonderful pictures in here. It's very exciting. So I have to say that I'm quite uncomfortable critiquing in many ways, because it's a photograph is someone's perception and someone's view, but it's seeing as these pictures have been sent in with a view to me having a look at them, I can just say what I think. It's only an opinion after all.
Absolutely, and the order that I put them is absolutely no reason for it. So it's just number 1 through 10. So I'm just gonna show some information about the person who created the image. So 1 second. Well, here we go. So this was shot by Michael Bailey. He's from Brittany, and he shot this, which is the Mont Saint-Michel in France, a very famous location. Have you actually been there? Have you shot it?
I haven't shot Mont Saint-Michel. I've been to Brittany many times and I love it very much, and I've shot along the coast all the way around Brittany, but I've never shot at Mont Saint-Michel.
Mm. So what did you think of this capture?
Yeah, lovely. I mean, he's got a lovely spot, his lovely viewpoint. His composition is strong. He's got the Mont Saint-Michel on the left-hand third, the horizon on the bottom third, and the people on the walkway on the right-hand third. So he's thought about where he's put everything. The cloud coming in from the top right-hand corner is bringing you back down very strongly towards the Mont Saint-Michel, and of course the leading line from the bottom left-hand corner, the grass, etc. is he's thought about the diagonals, and he's got all the shapes, and I think it corresponds really well. I think I think his black and white, his conversions looks like there's some sort of gradient in the sky. It might be a natural one, but it looks like there might be some sort of gradient, which is good. I think that the area that if it was my picture, I would have there wouldn't be anyone in it. But that's fine. I mean, I think he's put people in there, which adds something. I think, for me, the only criticism I would make, and I don't like to do that, is that the walkway, which leads us in from the bottom, is pretty much the same tone from where it starts at the very bottom of the picture to right through to where the people are. And I think I would have preferred to have seen some sort of gradient, some sort of change in tone, so it's slightly darker at the bottom and then leads you back. There you go, that sort of thing, and then just darken that a little bit, just so you've got some sort of dynamics. Just it's something like that, Tom. Just because that way, I feel that you are being brought into the picture in a slightly different way, just using tone and contrast again, and it kind of forms a nice light on the walkway, and it breaks up the slight monotony of the concrete taking up so much of the picture. I think that sort of thing, a little bit of play like that, but it's a great picture. Yeah, it's really, really, really pretty.
No, absolutely. I really love it. I've been there. They were doing some work, and so at the time, so this is new, and I could not get a nice shot of it, and the weather was terrible. But I really like how you say the lines, and everything seems to be positioned where it needs to be positioned. It's very, I don't know, it's very planned.
It's thought about it. Yeah, it's really thought about.
And you mentioned the people, that if you had taken this photograph yourself, you would not have included people. Does that mean that you don't like to include people to give a sense of proportions to things?
That's what it means, yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know why. I think I prefer the sort of isolation of for me, if I'd been taking this picture, I would have waited for people to go, because I kind of like, again, that story left untold.
Okay.
And maybe that the viewer can perhaps imagine themselves standing there, and if there's someone else there already, then perhaps it's just a whole different emotion, and it's nothing against this gentleman's composition, it's just a personal choice. There's no right or wrong, is there?
You just don't like people.
That's it, I just hate people.
The next one, totally different. Let me just remove this. This was... Come on, bring up the information. Come on, not the death wheel. Okay, that was a building in Quebec. I don't know if it was in Quebec, the city, or just the region, by Alexandre Pace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, his composition is exceptional. The reflection down at the bottom of the picture with the brick building behind it, reflected is great. The little touch of cloud on the top right-hand corner is great. I think for me, the shape is great. As I was talking about shape earlier on, and if you look right now at I don't know if you can see, I don't know if the viewers will see what I'm seeing, but will they see the small version in the top left-hand corner, Tom, or is that going to be filled by something else in your final version of this?
The what? Sorry, what do you see?
Yes, the little navigator on the top left-hand, the little sort of small version, the thumbnail of the picture. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
Will viewers see that or not?
Yeah, we see it, yes.
Okay, well, often I'll use that just to sort of stand back from a picture. It's a bit like a painter sort of taking a few steps back and looking at the balance. I think it's very important. And by using that, you can see that the shape is very strong. You can see it's a very strong form. I think for me, the only criticism is I feel that with this sort of thing, he's underexposed. And you saw that actually by what you did. You can see that all that is underexposed. And I would prefer to have seen that. I would prefer to have seen the detail in there. So it might have looked black or dark, but when you got close to the print or the picture, you'd be able to see all the detail within the shadows. So for me, that's the criticism, and I'm sure that this has happened in post-processing. I think he's perhaps pushed the contrast a little bit too much. But I like his composition a lot. I think there you go. So that's instantly. It's not inky black as you're doing that. You're just lighting up a bit, aren't you?
Yeah, I just added a +3 on the black.
Yeah.
That's all I'm doing, and just making sure that it's not clogged. Because if we were to print that wouldn't work well. But
instantly, I feel that it's a slight. You can actually look into the shadows and feel something, and it's not like bars across a window anymore. It's actually there's stuff in there which. I think, but that's a criticism. I think it's probably a processing criticism more than anything else. I think the actual picture is very well done, and very hard to do this sort of thing. So well done.
The next one is, I'm just going to go back to a
Two of them.
single view. I don't know you, but every time I look at this image, I can't stop smiling. It's just this very communicative smile on that man's face, which was shot at a wedding by Remy Colnet.
Yeah, it's a wonderful face. You can just see the red wine in this guy's hand, and the whole sort of, you can hear the music in the background. You can feel the occasion, and look at the enthusiasm in his eyes, and what a great smile. It's brilliant. I love this guy's got a great face. I love that. For someone that doesn't like people, I'm very, as someone I'd like to meet and have a good chat with, I think. I'm sure he's got a story to tell, and that's what comes across in this. I love the reflection in his eyes is great. You can really see, that the highlight is the pin in light in his eyes is wonderful, and they really make his face come alive. The contrast that Monsieur Colnet has used is great within the face. He's obviously someone that knows what he's doing with black and white composition. His histogram, looking at that, is also exceptionally good. So he's controlled the tones. There's no pure black, no pure white in there, which is dead right for me. That's what I would try and do myself. My only criticism is, whilst the depth of field works incredibly, what aperture is he shot this at?
3.6.
Yeah, so he's blurred the background very well. But my slight problem is with his, as I'm looking at it, the left-hand side, just by his ear, is that side just looks a little bit, there. It looks a little bit distracting. I just put my hand over it a minute ago, and just the whole picture felt better. So I think that perhaps for me, it made me realise also how much when I'm working, I'm obviously focusing normally on a single subject. I don't actually have more than one subject in my pictures, but I'm also thinking about what's behind it constantly, and the relationship with the horizon or whatever it is. And I think in this case, it's just slightly distracting to have that thing by his ear. Whereas on the right-hand side of the picture, it looks fine. It doesn't bother because there's more of it, I suppose. Mm-hmm. That's the only criticism. It's a small one, but it's beautifully taken, beautifully captured, and a wonderful picture that does make you smile, which after all is a wonderful attribute for any photograph.
And I have no idea where Remy is from, but for some reason when I look at this, it reminds me of Pagnol's, the movie that they made of Pagnol's stories and all. I just think the southeast of France for some reason.
Very much, yeah. Even Corsica or something.
Yes.
But yeah, very much. It's that sort of feel to it.
Interesting. The next one is by Andrew Baker. Andrew is an Englishman who lives in France and took that tree in the winter, and he called it a sad tree because of, winter being there's no leaf, but also this bend. And he actually decided he first captured it like this, and then he decided to put himself in. So this is Andrew on the photograph, just thinking that he would add something to the photograph. And I can understand why he would say that. What do you think of this? There is mist, and it's almost square, where it's a 4x3. But
you've got two ingredients, well, three, because it's in black and white as well. So there's lots of ingredients I like about this picture. No, I think it's a great subject. I think the trees. It does look a bit sad, but it's fun. I like the mist. I think probably by including himself, he's made it a more interesting photograph, and the way he's looking up at the tree. No, I think it's quite fascinating. I think for me, it's probably a little bit underexposed, maybe a stop underexposed. So it's just it's a bit too grey. I think I'd like to have seen the exposure just a bit more light in there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I noticed that I had increased the exposure a little bit myself. So that was the original, and that is just a little bit, but it's still there's still something. But it's shot into the light, as we can see.
Which is lovely. I mean, that really works. Shooting into the light is wonderful. But yeah, I think it's got a lot about it, a lot of mystery about it.
And interestingly, I seem to have the detail of his. I don't know how that's possible, given it's a JPEG, but I seem to have all the information of the development. And I just wonder. Yeah, you see, it did add some grain to it, because obviously with ISO 200, you would not have that level of grain. But I know he's not shooting DSLR. I think he has a bridge or a mirrorless camera at least.
No, it's a nice picture.
This one is from it's from Nicola Hardy, and it's a picture of his 10-year-old son, who I guess was playing with water. And I just love the effect. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I like the effect too. speaking as a parent who has children of a similar age, the fact that he's actually managed to get a picture of a child that age and it's actually in the frame at all is quite amazing. So hats off to him for that, because they move fast, these children, when they're trying to take their picture. No, I like this picture. Now he's done something. He's obviously increased the contrast a lot, so that the dark, and we saw them by accident. The background is very black. But I think in this, but that seems to work here. I think it's conversely, not unlike the other image. This is sort of done for a reason, and I think in this case it works. I like the isolation of the hand and the little sort of detail. The wet fingers is great. The light on the fingers. We were speaking about the light on the little finger, and I think that needs to be controlled a little bit. It's just a little bit too much, a bit distracting there. But I think the way he's got the hand, the way it stands out in the picture is wonderful. And what a wonderful picture to have on your wall of your son as well. I think it's such a fun picture, and it can only be a fun moment. So very well captured and well taken.
It's thinking of the white as well, because when you take your photograph of water in the ocean and so on, you tend to be faced with the challenge of not having your white being blown out. So it's actually the fact of shooting black and white give you more leverage as well, right?
Well, it shouldn't it? Because it's called black and white. But I find that if anything, I'm more conscious of it. I'm as you probably realise, I'm absolutely fastidious about tone, and that's probably the one area that I'm very critical about, that and focus. In my own work, that I just do not like to blow anything out or like to have anything that's black. They call it black and white, but really it's completely the wrong term for me, because I don't like there to be any black or any white in my photographs. But it's just, again, it's all down to personal things. But I like there to be all the information. I like there to be everything and then it's there if you want it, but scaled down so it's just in the background. But in this case, it's a different sort of thing. This is a picture that's he's done. I reckon he's done that on purpose. I don't think it was black originally. I think he's made it black, and I think, as I said, what a fun picture. A bit like the picture of the gentleman earlier. This just makes you smile. It's a fun picture.
Absolutely. So this one, if I remember correctly, was done in Switzerland. And for those of you who wonder why I've got some details in the history here, like if I had retouched the image, it's just because we have done the French version of this video before with Jonathan. And so we went through this review of pictures in French, and therefore whatever comment Jonathan was making, I tried to apply them to the image. That's why you may see some history here in Lightroom. So this was done in Switzerland, in Lausanne, and it's the Sunrise by Dominique Fair.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic image. I think it looks like it should be sort of in a different format, a cover of a book or something. It's got a lot of atmosphere to it, I think. A great sky. I think, again, because it's a landscape, and again, because it's playing with real things, I'd like to see some more detail in the shadows. It looks a little bit too dark, but having said that, he's managed to retain a lot of detail on the back side of that wall. You can see all the brickwork there, which is good, and I think it's important to have that. So I would just do your lightning job like you did before, and just to reduce that, and it wouldn't take much to get that on form. But I think it's, there you go. I think that's, I don't like the red. I'm kidding. No, that looks good. No, I think it's great. I think maybe a couple of the buildings look a bit unreal. I don't know whether they've been played with a bit. That looks a sort of strange glow around. It's just a slightly overzealous processing, I think. Again, I've always believed that if you can see it's been touched, then you've done it too much. That almost rhymes, which is a bit sad, but that's something that sticks in my mind a lot, and I can see that that's been played with, and it looks a bit unnatural because with that much light behind, that building wouldn't be so bright. So I feel that that's maybe been a bit overdone. But apart from that, the composition's good. I love the sky. It's been thought about, and again, it has a sense of space about it because half the image is sky, and I like that. Good job, I think. Really good job.
Yeah, I personally really like this, and I agree with everything you said here. There's something interesting and I don't know if it's the lens that he used, and I don't know which lens he used, but
It's like Boeing. Interesting.
It seems that it's quite sharp at the front, and then as soon as you go on the edges, it gets really, really blurry. But once again, I don't know which. I don't have the EXIF, so I don't even know what angle it was shot. But it's quite strange how blurry it is on the other side without being pulled like we would get from extra wide angle lenses. Interesting.
Yeah.
So this was shot by Michael Martino, and that was in Thailand, and it's just a float on the river somewhere, shot in the winter with a mist.
With a mist. And with half the picture, just pretty much nothing, which is lovely. And I like the space in this picture. Again, it's very much on brand for me. I think that the subject matter is great. I like the fact he's had the courage to leave the space. There'll be camera clubs all over the world jumping up and down saying there's too much negative space, but, they don't know everything. I just think that he's followed his instincts. He wanted the space there, otherwise it wouldn't be there. And he would have done something else. So, good on him. My only criticism again is it looks a little bit underexposed, but I think if you go back to the original, because I think you've shown the version with.
Yeah, my bad. That's the original. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a little bit flat, I think. But I think with a little tweak of exposure or contrast or something, I think it pulls it back in. I think one has to be careful with mist that. If you underexpose it, it tends to look, especially in black and white, too grey and a bit sort of monotonous. But as soon as you up the luminescence, the light in and exposure, then it comes to life. And I think that's what this needed.
Are you? We see often in black and white photograph people adding grain to it, almost sort of a nostalgia for the old days. Is this something that you do as well? Do you add grain to your images?
Yeah. Sometimes, like it comes back to what I was talking about before. Is I would choose a film for its grain when I was because I wanted a grainy image, so I would add grain if I felt it needed it or if I felt that it was right. And I mean, not so much. This has got quite a lot of grain, but I don't know if it's natural if it's been added. But it doesn't bother. It's added. No, but I like grain. I think it adds. Again, it goes to that whole thing about it takes away the perfection. It adds a bit of dirtiness and a bit of character. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. It can be overdone, but I think in this case it looks quite nice. I think it looks natural.
And a total different time of the day, I would say, is this one. And I'm just going to go back to the original. And that was shot in Canada by Lynn, and it's fantastic to see a lady sending a photograph. I see too many work done by guys, and I almost feel like photography is a guy thing, and that saddens me. So I'm glad that it's a woman sending her work, and that's an isolated house on the river called Mille Îles, which means Southern's Island in Canada. What do you think of that? I'm just going to turn off the warnings there.
No, I like it. I like the subject, and what a place to live. God, what a beautiful it is. Interesting to come back to your ladies in photography thing. With ocean capture, we found that over 75% of our clients are ladies who come and tend to have a mostly less interested in the gear and much more interested in the artistic side of photography, which is wonderful. And I think if there's a criticism against a lot of men photographers is that they're just too interested in the kit, and it's not about the paintbrush, it's about what you do with it, surely. So I think this lady is great. It's wonderful she sent this in. I think it's a great spot. She's almost managed to create a sort of almost infrared feel for this picture with the way the sky's gone and the blue's gone very black. I think for me, the picture is on the left-hand side rather than include the whole thing. Again, I like to tend to work with one subject, as I've said, and there was no mist here. That's kind of more what I would be thinking. But again, that's a very personal decision. I'd probably been a bit more light in the middle underneath the house and a bit of a gradient coming up from the bottom, and that would probably be the sort of thing I would do. But it's almost a square now. Look, is that a square?
I think I went for a square when we did this. Yes.
Yeah, you see.
You had to. I'm having a conversation with Jonathan Chritchley.
Well, yeah, it's a bit sad that I'm so stuck in my ways, but it now feels, I guess you get the point about the subject. I feel that the picture now tells the story more than before. I felt it was a little bit disjointed by having. It's nice having the bridge and the other little house, but I feel now I know where to look and I understand what I'm being told, and it leaves stuff to my imagination too, like who lives in there, and can you imagine getting to the supermarket and things like that. But what a great place, and that boathouse there is beautiful, isn't it? Isn't that lovely? I love that woodwork. It's what a wonderful place.
Absolutely.
Great.
Well, one little thing that I would say to Lynn is when it comes to post-production, it seems that she did darken the sky, or she did do a treatment to the sky. And just watch out, Lynn, because I suspect you used a mask inside Lightroom with an adjustment brush. And what we end up getting is this little line where it gets very contrasty, and that's kind of a halo thing that we have in Lightroom. So really watch out when you use the auto mask feature in Lightroom. I know it's very useful when you got details like this, so you don't actually cover spots you don't want to, but as a result, it just gives you this white line around the buildings that is not meant to be there. So just watch out for that.
Wise words. I didn't even know you could do that in Lightroom. It's great.
It's very useful, but if you use it against very contrasty thing, and you know, Jonathan, as much as I do, that even sometime naturally when you take the shot in very contrasted place like branches, even in black and white, you tend to have this weird silver lining around the on the contour of things, and it's quite annoying. If trying to remove that is very difficult, but you get this same artifact when you use the mask in Lightroom, and sometimes it's just a bit of pain. You tend to have it as well. I see it here. You tend to have it as well on trees. You can see here the contour of the trees as well, where it's much brighter. This one, which I totally love. I love this one. That was shot in Arcachon, which is almost the same region as where you live, but a couple of hours up north.
Yeah, it is. I know Arcachon exceptionally well. It's somewhere I go a lot, both socially and to work. It's great. It's a wonderful environment, and it's a great place to be. And I'd actually recognised where this was before you told me the first time, because I looked closely at the pier that you're very difficult to see. But if you just blow up on the pier, if you can, Tom, there you go. You can just see behind. There's a pier there with a boat at the end of it. I recognise that pier, which is where you get the boat to go over to Cap Ferret and all sorts of things. It's a lovely spot here, and I like this picture again. I think it's a bit like the one that was, excuse me, with the bench overlooking the view of the city. It has that sort of feel to it. There's a definitely a story here, and I know that it had benches in common as well. Maybe I'm being a bit some lacking imagination there, but I think that this has. I like this tree. I love the shape that this tree is making against the sky. I think it's really lovely. And this person who probably walks up and down this and sits on this bench every day, I think there's a story here which I find very intriguing. I mentioned before that I felt there was a bit of a halo around this person, but you think it might be the sharpening that more than anything else, that the person might have tried to sharpen the. Yeah. But nevertheless, I think that production generally on the black and white is pretty good. I think it's perhaps a little bit grey in the middle there, but I think generally they've managed to hold all the contrast in. Look at that lady, isn't that lovely? A lovely view. She's looking out over the water. She's looking over towards Cap Ferret and everything. Beautiful day. It must be I don't know, early evening by the shadow, something like that. But yeah, a well thought about and composed image. I like it.
I absolutely love it. For some reason, the black and the darks, I really find that the darks are well positioned in this one, and the texture of the tree. I love texture, and to me that's really great. But I'm really wondering what his exposure was, because the level of sharpening he has applied to the image, it's a killer. Although, I mean, I'm dealing with a JPEG here, but this is heavy stuff. So I'm wondering if you retouched that in Photoshop, maybe, I don't know, which would explain why we don't have the XF at all. Final image, and this one is from, I know the guy.
To go back to the original though, because it's not the original.
It's not the original, absolutely. This is from Mario, and Mario Rossi. He's a guy that I know. He lives here in Scotland, and he is your biggest fan. And in fact, Mario made me laugh because when I posted the announcement for our meeting online on Facebook, he added a comment saying, "Oh, this is my favorite photographer of all time." And as a joke, I said to him, I said, "Well, thank you, Mario, but we've known each other for years, and you could have told me that a long time ago." And obviously, little did I know that it was just referring to you and not me at all, which saddened me, but at the same time pleased me and reconfirmed me in the choice that I made to approach you. So yeah, he's the biggest fan, and I've seen some of his work in black and white, using water, long exposure, mist, and now that I know that he's a big fan of you, a lot of things clears up, and I understand his approach now. So I'm sure it's really appreciating this discussion that we're having here. What do you think of Mario's work?
Well, how can I?
Now that I've said that,
just good taste. no, he's. This is a subject matter that I understand. That it feels right to me. I understand this. I think it's a very complicated image. To create such simplicity in a very complex structure is very well done. I'm not sure if that's painted white, the structure, or if there's just light hitting it on one side, but that's, it's a tough thing to cope with. Yeah, you see those little white patches. Is that actually painted?
Not natural, but might be the water level.
Maybe, yeah, it could be. But either way, it's difficult to sort of control that sort of thing. He's done very well. I think probably my criticism would be, if you're going to introduce some foreground into this sort of picture, because this is a picture that relies on its simplicity. He's used a long exposure and he's got movement in the sky. All these things will help add simplicity to a picture by taking away texture. He's left that sort of mud or sand or something in the bottom, and that for me doesn't quite cut it. I think if you're going to do that, it has to be something very strong. Whereas by cutting it out, we've gone square again. By cutting it out, I think it does what the picture wants to do, and it's just talking to you about the structure and making you wonder what it is, and looking at the sky and the sort of soft, painterly feel to the sky. I think it probably could do with a little bit more exposure. It's looking at the histograms a little bit underexposed, but not a lot, just a bit. But I think it's a nice picture. I think he's thought about the composition. I like where the end of the structure ends up. What is it, like an old pier or something? He's put that in the right place because he's left space on the left-hand side for you for your eye to get around and see the horizon and understand what's going on. So it has space, it has feeling, it's very soft, and I think it works very well. He's done a good job. Sorry, go on.
No, I was saying. I was going to say it's interesting what you say about foreground, because I just had somebody send me a picture for review for this month's review, and on the Academy, and he's like, "Oh, I've seen an exhibit somewhere, and I've noticed that artist always plays something in the foreground," and I found that quite interesting. So he sent me a picture, and it's basically a hill with it's mountains. And you've got an old farm on it, far away. And at the front, he just left two big rocks in focus. And I understood what he tried to do, but I find, just like as you said here, that it's complicating the narrative of the picture. And I know there's a school that says, well, you need to have a foreground into your photograph. And we see a lot of wide-angle landscape shot with the foreground, a rock and something. And I always find that it's quite disruptive. It doesn't help the narrative of the image. And when I look at your images, because of your approach of doing something very simplistic in terms of narrative, you never have something in the foreground, it seems.
Very, very rarely. I do sometimes, but not very often. It has to be something that is really... There has to be a reason that it's there, that I've cut it out and it doesn't work as well. There must be some reason. But so generally I don't. And I think that people do. I mean, you spoke about Joe Cornish, and he very successfully puts things in the foreground and it works remarkably well. But it's very hard to do. He does it exceptionally well, and he's a master at it. I mean, that's why he's Joe Cornish, and that's why he's done what he's done. But what a lovely man as well he is. But it's very difficult to get right, and I think it has to be with me. I'm looking Joe or those great landscape photographers. They'll have relationships between foreground and background and things that were intricate sort of relationships between those things. I'm just not good at that sort of thing. I don't see it. I don't have that brain that works that way. And mine just wants things to be free and clear and on their own, but set in space. That's just the way my mind works, and that's why that picture that you just showed. That's why it works better for me like that, because it's getting to the point, it's leaving space around. But what a great selection of pictures!
Absolutely. Well, that leads us to the end of this meeting, this discussion. Wow, over 2 hours, even longer than the French version.
Sorry.
But I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. This is so insightful. That's why I love this series. It's really getting in the head, in the mind of the artist, and this is not something that we necessarily get often. To understand their work, we appreciate it. We don't really understand the reason for it. And even if we don't know the story behind each exposure, we still appreciate it. But I find that knowing, it's a little bit like the behind the scene and the making of that we find now on DVDs and Blu-rays. It's like, the reason why we buy the Blu-rays and the DVDs is not necessarily for the quality of it. We want to know more. We want to know how things were done. And I think that's it's so insightful, and it helps us. It's inspiring. Let me know, guys, what you think in the comment. Did you like this series? Do you have any question for Jonathan? Don't hesitate to put it, and I'll make sure that to transfer that to him. Thank you again, Jonathan, really, for taking the time to do this exercise with us. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
And keep up the good work. And the next time I'm preparing a workshop in the southwest France next year, and I'll contact you and make sure to see and come see you, because you're only a few hours from where I am. So
you're very welcome.
It'd be good to meet face to face. Well, until next time, this is Tom Migot saying, if you like it, well, capture it, and maybe, well, do it in monochrome. Cheers.